because we've got these two sides of the equation, and both Canva and Deputy are pretty far along in terms of their journey, in terms of like the product market fit, just tell us what you think growth is to you at the stage that your companies are in at the moment. Is it going from, a million users to 1,000,001 users, or is it to go from 1 to 10, etc.? What are the kind of the metrics that you tend to hear handed down from the business? How should the business be communicating growth to you guys?
So I think we recently crossed 500 million shifts on our business, on our platform at Deputy, and that was a good milestone that we achieved. I think in terms of growth, definitely on the side of growth, like we're still growing and we have like multiple products that are coming out that we need to offer and to our existing client base as well.
Yeah.
And then and we're acquiring more customers as well as we go with all of those offerings.
So you're saying, so there's a term that I use, and I guess it's kind of generally known, which is called the one metric that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's the real sort of way that you say, are we doing well or not? So the one metric that matters is shifts, in a sense.
It's I would say that if the one metric that will matter is like how many was the user retention and how many people are like coming back and using the product like continuously.
Yep.
And is that usage like growing over a period? Let's say you started with Deputy, right?
Yep.
And then you started with 10 employees initially, 10 shift workers, right? Now have you moved to 15? Have you moved to 25? And we help you grow along with the way as well. And I think a great example would be Gelato Messina that grew with Deputy, and they're pretty huge customers as well for us. There are a couple of examples from Deputies like Bunnings, Dutch Brothers from the UK.
Yeah, okay, we might come back to that then.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Growth, what does get communicated from?
That's a very broad question.
Yeah. Well, that's the first question.
Well, I mean, look, when you think about growth, like at the core of growth is like, are you growing revenue? Yes or no? And then you need to understand the metrics that lead to revenue, which is usually just an equation. So you've got your input and your metrics, and then it sort of lead to that. The way we look at it at Canva is that if we grow monthly active users, revenue will come. Like we can monetize that. And so we're really looking at like how do we grow MAUs, and then we monetize on the base of MAUs. Yeah.
Okay, so MAUs, very well known in the SaaS industry. Do you kind of worry about DAUs at all, like when down to a daily, or because I remember back in the early days, Facebook used to talk about how many minutes a day users were, like that level of addiction. Do you have a similar sort of aspiration?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the use cases as well, right? If you come to Canva and you design a Christmas card, maybe you use it once a year. Yes. Right? Maybe, but if you're a business and you're a marketing team and you've deployed Canva to create content and use it on social media and kind of, scale your business, then it's a different use case. Then daily, we start looking at, how do they do it? In my world, so what I do is I try to grow the number of businesses that successfully use Canva. So I look at the number of teams that are created, free team, and then how many of them take a trial to our Canva for Team product, and then how many of them convert and then retain. It's kind of like that journey.
Right, got it. So that must mean that you're kind of measuring the number of people. There's a term called the flywheel effect, which originally there was Redpoint wrote an article, I think it was Redpoint, or maybe Benchmark, wrote an article about Atlassian in terms of somebody starts using it in the organisation, and then what happens is they invite other people and it turns into a flywheel for growth. So is that size of the team that's using it, because let's focus on teams for now, is that like a standard metric too, that you see invite activity going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the product growth team very much track that. How many invite get sent and how many accepted, what's the percentage, and what can we do to increase that? And also the product offer ways to increase that virality. So if you create a presentation on Canva, you send it to someone who's not on Canva, they can still watch it, and there's a little logo at the bottom that get you to Canva, which is the simplest trick in the book. But at the scale of Canva, this is like millions of MAUs that you get from just the simple mechanism.
Cool, very good. Okay, so when we talk about growth from a product perspective, and this just comes down to your two roles. How much should actually happen in the application? Like, how much is dev actually bought into making product decisions or contributing to product decisions that are specifically around growth? And is it campaign-based or is it fundamentals to the product?
Let me think about that. That's a good one.
I'll give you an example. On my blog, a couple of years ago, I wrote a thing on deputies onboarding. And deputies onboarding was really good in terms of it actually made you step through a bunch of things to actually experience that sort of shift-based type thing. So that was hard-coded in.
Yeah, so I think, that was the first part of the thing that I worked on Deputy. That was the first of the feature that I worked on Deputy. I think the way that we get involved is like the product managers or the principal PMs and the director of growth, they first discussed, okay, this is a way that we could, activate more growth. They set up these OKRs. They know, okay, this is what we want. This is the objective.
Okay, so OKRs do come down to you quarterly OKRs.
Yes, yep. and then after that, we decide as a team, as like in the growth team, okay, how could we achieve that? Or these are the initiatives that they have already in mind, and they share it with us. It's like more or less like do this for dev. It's not like that, kind of like a collaborative effort from PMs as well. Like, okay, this is what we want to do. How can we do it from engineering side as well? What do you think? What do you guys think?
Right.
And then I think one of the things that we came up with was that gamification checklist. That's what we call it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So it's kind of like you onboard a deputy, and even the onboarding process is like personalized for you. So you onboard a deputy, you get this checklist, and you mark those key actions that done, and you get those free extra trial days as well. And those are key metrics in terms of like key actions that you perform at Deputy, and then that drives again, like after that we measure that, okay, how did it affect the trial retention, how did it affect the retention after it as well, like how many users converted after it. So that's all that we measure, and then I think it takes, what we account for is like a monthly conversion basis.
Yeah, okay. I realized I should just step back and ask a question, which is that you're in the growth team at Deputy, but you're a developer.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got a growth team with developers in it, and you've got a product team with developers in it.
No, it's the product team is a whole big team, like a separate team, but there are like two parts of product as well, like growth as well, and like one that focuses on core features and making sure the core is like stable and consistent with what we offer today. Yeah. And growth is like one that goes ahead, like two growth teams, like one is for web, one is for mobile, and it is a mix of both, like product designers, engineers, technical leaders, engineering managers, and all of that. So and yeah, it's a collaborative effort between products, designers, and engineers.
Yeah. Okay. So just taking the checklist, for example, if you do take a look at that blog post, I didn't say where I was from a company called contextu.al. So on our blog, we've got this deputy look at this checklist that they actually have. So it's quite interesting, and if you can experience it by going into the product as well too. So it really sort of takes you through a situation where you know where you are in the process. If you think about when you're buying an airline ticket, you quite often know how many steps you're going through, so they have the breadcrumbs up the top. It's like an advanced version of that, but more gamified in that sense, because there's incentives for you to do certain. So give us an example of an incentive.
Incentive would be, say, I think what Deputy does is, as soon as you kind of like sign up, first of all, the sign up is like super personalized. So let's say we ask you a bunch of like 4 or 5 questions initially, and that the way that we phrase those 4 or 5 questions is like, we don't want data out of that. Like the way we phrase it is, it's gonna personalize your onboarding journey. So we ask you like, what's the intent that you're signing up with? And then based on the intent, we personalize it. Is like, do you want it for scheduling only, timesheet only? And then if you select one of those intents, we kind of like change that list, like the checklist based off of that.
Right.
And then once you get into the trial, you have set number of days, right? Okay, this is how long the trial is gonna last. But if you use those, if you go through those key actions, if you do those key actions, then you learn more of Deputy, you get awarded with trial days, like based on the complexity of that action or how it like aligns with our metric, we give you a number of days, like let's say 5 days or 2 days based on each action, and then kind of like keeps you engaged.
So the key lessons there for anybody is allow the user to get into the application really early, based on who they're signing up as. Would you just call it a persona?
Yes, we do it.
Based on the persona, you're actually sort of starting to craft the onboarding experience to actually smooth the way, and then you're actually giving them some sort of incentive to actually complete that.
Exactly, and I think at the top of whenever you land in the app, the first screen at the homepage that we have a banner on top which says you that trial is ending in this many days. Kind of like uses that psychological trick of like loss aversion,
Yep.
and then it kind of like okay makes you go okay. There's a checklist on the page as well, and you see I could do that, and like that gives extra days, and then I could like come back to Deputy and try it back again. And
Cool.
it's kinda like
Were you there when this first got crafted out at Deputy?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very familiar with a lot of that. It's really interesting, you know.
So in terms of growth, activation and onboarding is a really key component of that. You've acquired the user, they've arrived at the site, now don't give them a crappy experience that makes them churn out straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think thinking of your previous question, I was thinking about a story and how I actually got into growth. So at Venn, I was doing marketing and paid SEO, CRO, the full lot, you know. And then we were sending that mass amount of people to the sign-up flow, but then no one was looking after the sign-up flow because product owned it and they didn't really care. And so that wasn't really optimized. And so I really wanted to do something about it. And I was like, the only way to actually transcend what department do you belong to is to do growth, which is across the board. So I do specialize in acquisition due to my background of getting them on board, but the activation phase is very much what we focused on for 2 years at Deputy. It was like, you know, trial to paid rate, you know, and it was trying demo data, capturing all of that information. And what's really fascinating to me is then I moved to Canva, which is the opposite. We don't capture anything. We don't know anything about like the business and who they are and stuff. And so, you know, I'm kind of on that journey to do that more and like redoing our onboarding and enriching some of the data and doing all of that stuff. You know?
So let's come back to that. Is that because ultimately, sort of at the DNA, Canva's very much a B2C experience up front, and whereas at Deputy it's kind of a B2B, even though the person who's on the shift is kind of like a consumer, but because they're there to earn money, there's sort of a B2B flavour about it or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Deputy is very much a B2B software. You know, you need to capture the information to tailor the full buying journey to them.
Yeah.
But Canva is like no friction, just get in the product, start using it.
Yep.
And so, you know, our challenge is like, how do we carve out that experience for businesses?
Right, so there's another lesson in there which was basically the metric of measuring, if you're in a B2B type situation, measuring those activation points, whether it's conversion to paid or whether it's something else in terms of like, I guess what you've got is you're capturing the email address up front, which means you can re-engage somebody that's halfway through activation, and you know, and then there's other metrics along the way, such as completing certain steps in that process. So you're saying that's important, or both of you are saying that's important in a B2B type thing, but not always. So yeah, okay, cool. So somebody gets into that flow, they're signed up, they're not quite activated at that stage yet. Do you then basically hammer them with push notifications, emails? You know, what's the right balance in that, and how do you measure what's the right balance?
I think, we do push notifications as soon as you, let's say, sign up on a trial and then you don't do anything in the app, you get a notification, like in-app notification from the app, and says like, book a demo with an expert. And then...
Okay, so the offer of a human contact if something's difficult or...
for them to, you know, on board as well. And then I think the other thing is like we do catch up with them on the, we do send them a bunch of emails as well. And then let's say if the trial is expired, and then they still don't get back to us, get back in the app or do anything, we still kind of like send them and like an email with a type form link asking them why they didn't like go with us, and like asking them, okay, and some of them get back as well, like that's good insights for us to learn as well. Okay, what is that, how are we not getting these guys on board, and like what are we missing? So
is the email from Ashik still there? Because we used to do that, you know, when the trial expire, we'll send an email from the CEO and say, we're really sorry that, you know, it didn't work out for you, you know, like, would you have 5 minutes to tell us why it didn't work out for your business? And you get great insight because, they're talking to the CEO, but yeah, it was very important to create that feedback loop.
Yeah, so it's like an exit survey
Yep.
in a sense. And so is it still there?
It is still there, and kind of like it comes back to a Slack channel, which is called customer non-conversion feedback.
Yeah.
There you can see, the intent that they signed up with, the number of employees that they selected, the range that they selected for their business, like how many employees do they have, and then what's the issues that they face, and so.
Does it still come from the CEO?
That's something that I'm not sure of.
So it's kind of an interesting, we've tried a bunch of different type of exit surveys over time, and there's always like a very low response rate because they've already moved on psychologically. So sometimes, you try different things about, I thought you'd be the kind of person that'd be happy to share feedback, or, some guilt trip like that. And so using the CEO was one of those kind of techniques. I've seen that with a lot of Bay Area companies as well too. I'm the founder, talk to me, because it gives you that sense of connection with fame or something like that.
Yeah, that's something probably for the crowd is like, if you're a founder, just be cheeky, it's okay. Like you get away with a lot because you're a founder, you're just trying. And it's the same for the CEO. It's okay if they ask, hey, look, it didn't work out. You probably answer to the CEO, right?
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback. So before we wind further into the journey, I'm just going to go back to acquisition because, that's you said that was your strength, or that's where you started out. And it sounds like, so are you still in the acquisition end of the spectrum at Canva now?
Yeah, I still look at activation and retention as part of like the metrics and work very closely with product growth. So
to justify your spend, or?
It's 25 million, so you better justify it, it's a lot of money. Yeah, for sure. And then you just look at the metrics and the buying journey for teams and what does that look like, Yeah, for sure. But coming back to your question, what do? You get them to sign up, and then what does activation look like? I think it's less about like the tricks and tips and, like things which work in a lot of circumstances, but more about truly understanding what they're trying to achieve. Like, what are their goals? And usually when they sign up and they try your software for a business, they will give you between 7 and 15 minutes of their time to figure out if it's going to match with what they need. And then you have different level of sophistication of a buyer, right? So you've got someone who's got a rough idea, they come in, they just want to play with it, and then they're gonna make a call, and then half of them never come back, right?
Yep.
But then you'll have people like I remember at Venn, which was a really humbling experience. I went to see that business owner. She was a woman who owned a fashion store, and she was looking for a new point of sale software, and she actually built out like a requirement document based on her workflow, like how she worked in a business and what would the technology solve for her. And so she had that, and so she went through the website, our help document, our FAQ, trying to like tick all of the boxes to see if it works for them. So that's kind of what you have to do, is mirror that in your product, getting them to the outcome that they're trying to achieve for their business.
So why do you say it was a humbling experience? Because her matrix was completely different to your product at that time? Or?
I think it's more like when you work in growth, you work with numbers. And sometimes very big numbers, like 6,000 trial a month, now at Canva it's like a lot more, and then you just forget,
that human aspect of it.
Yeah, they're not just numbers, they're just people who are buying your software as a solution to a problem.
Yes. So in the Vend thing, there was a story in regards to acquisition that Jordan talked about, which was also quite a sort of like a leap of ingenuity. So you had this POS product, and you were trying to drive some more top of funnel acquisition. So you built a different product.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Vend, so I was working in marketing, and there was the hackathon on the weekend, right? And those engineers and smart people, they came out of the idea of like using your phone as a scanner. So you could do like your inventory in your retail store, and instead of having to buy an expensive scanner, you can just use your phone. And so they pitched the idea to the product team, and the product team was like, "Nah, we're busy. We got feature to build, right?" And so
there's another lesson. The product team will go for continuity or status quo. So sometimes
innovation is hard.
Yeah,
it's very hard. It's a risky bet, right? It's a very risky bet. It's a risky proposition. So anyway, and then Jordan, the PM at the time, was talking to me about this, and I was saying, "Oh, I want to use apps for acquisition." And he said, "Hey, look, we've got that idea." And I said, "Look, I've got money. why don't we just go to like, a software, like an agency and just get it built, yeah, just use marketing money and just build it. And so I work with Jordan and we just launched like a first version of that. And the concept is, make it free, make it the best product that you can, and it needs to be useful regardless of if you use Venn or not, right? And so, and we really actually, we got product market fit right away. Like in the App Store, people start downloading it like crazy and just using it and then exporting CSV and just using it for the stock take, and then we start thinking about, okay, now that we have that, what do we do to bridge it to Vans? And what was really interesting is we got into quite a lot of trouble for that at the beginning. It was like the product, the product lead. Yep. Yeah, of course, it's like, why are you doing this? And but I vividly remember that time 2 years later in a meeting room with the CEO and the exec team, and the CEO saying that's the best thing we've done in the last 2 years, so that was really cool, but that was also very risky, and when I tried to do the same at zero, it was a very different outcome, It was much harder to get that through, yeah.
Was that receipts by any chance? Or
what does that mean, sorry?
expense claims? Because they charge for that.
There was a lot of like product growth experiment that we did with Jordan, which was really interesting, around network effect and connecting zero account to each other, integration with Facebook, like all of that different element.
Yep.
The story there is the CEO, the founder at the time, wanted to do all of this cool stuff and then was asking the company to do it, but it's so big that 90 people will work on it and 6 months later nothing would have happened. So they brought us on board to be like, hey, just go rogue and try something. So myself, Jordan, a PM, and then 2 engineers, and then we just start building stuff. And then the CEO loved it, and it was still too hard to actually like get to a stage where we could launch it.
Yeah, interesting. Organizational culture is part of the equation of success.
And look, part of it, you get it. They do accounting, right? Like you can't just like you're dealing with like financial data and everything. So I get some of that,
Yeah.
But that's where it's much harder to do growth in that context.
Got it. Any skunk works that have actually kind of moved the needle in terms of acquisition, or
in terms of we did have at Deputy we regularly do like hackathons and stuff. Like one of the things that I remember during my time is called like Shift Pulse. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but it was pretty big.
Shift Pulse.
Right. At the end of the shift, we kind of like check how was your day from the shift worker. Like we check how was your day. How did it go? Are you happy, stressed? How do you feel? And then add some comments to it, and that went pretty viral during the big shift work week or something. And then the idea came out of like the hackathon, and a couple of engineers kind of like spent a week hustling on it with the PM, and kind of like got the product, like was very close to ready, and then a couple of more weeks in it was production ready and we shipped it, and later on we realized, this is pretty good, like everyone's like we're getting so much data from it now, and then we know okay how, and you give that data back to managers and how shift workers are performing under you, and then you get some more insights on okay how should they behave, the managers could behave themselves, or like how should they go about things, and then kind of like create this good culture in their own like company as well.
So what that's saying there is that ultimately it was actually making the product stickier, because you were actually giving new insights beyond just the transactional stuff, and so stickier was of value to the person who was paying the money, which was either the shift manager or the owner of the business, and so therefore it was increasing the reason why I would stick with Deputy.
Yep. Nothing. Yeah, there are a couple of more ideas that are coming through. There were like so bizarre ideas in the hackathon that we do, but like, and then after the hackathon, we kind of like get into the production. But okay, think about it. How are you going to ship it to production? And then now when we think back on it, like kind of okay, we have brought that into product backlog and say this is what we're going to do, and this is going to get that Deputy to the next level in terms of like bringing in more users. Plus, for the existing users, kind of increase value offering for them. One of the things that I could share with you would be a new product that's coming up is Hire. Like say from Deputy now, it's a new product offering that we're working on, and it's kind of like you can scan a QR code and you can like apply for you could apply for a job by just scanning from the QR code and kind of like just go 1, 2, 3 and bang, you're applied for the job.
Yeah.
And then the manager side of things, they could just go through it and like have those columns in the Deputy app, like in progress, kind of like done, interviewed, and all of that, and then okay, selected. They could see those videos and all of that stuff for the interview, the guy who interviews.
Yeah, so that's coming.
That's coming up. Yeah.
So you haven't got
it's
the
a big,
measurements
yeah,
on it yet.
it's a big one as well. Yeah.
So because Canva's so profitable and there's developers everywhere and stuff like that, does that make it harder to actually get something done, or do they just basically have a floating pool of people that say, yeah, I'll do that on my 20% time. I'm on this.
It's not even 20%. It's just things move.
Yeah.
Priority change and people commit.
Yep.
And is so dynamic and incredible at that, how big it is, and yet like the velocity of experimentation and things that we can ship is incredible, is unheard of, it's something that is part of the culture, and certainly something that I appreciate about Canva.
Yeah. So say you've got the product team who's ultimately deciding what's going into the product. So this is product embedded growth experiments. Who's the ultimate arbiter on that? Is it ultimately the product manager, the lead product manager? Because the growth team's floating around, so you have competing priorities, and they want to nail this, and it does require something to go into a release.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you don't want two teams also releasing two competing experiments, right?
Yeah. And I see there's been so many models of that, after like so many years in growth, I've seen it all, growth here, growth there, growth there, reporting to who, Look, Canva has a product team, and Canva has a product growth team, and Canva has a growth marketing team, which is us. On the product growth side, where you need to get to is that equation to revenue. And then you go down, like you build a ladder. How do you get to that, right? And then the equation is based on product metrics around activation and retention. And marketing metrics is your acquisition model, right? And then, for each of those, then the initiative that you have ladder up to those metrics, which is, are those experimentation going to have a material impact on this metric that then ladder up to all the way to revenue? So it's your ability to break down, and coming back to your question, because Canva does it so well, then it's part of that. So we have like monthly business review where we see the metrics and then how product growth and growth marketing experiment is, how likely we have to have an impact on this, how confident we are, and that's based on our product.
Cool. So let's move, sort of jump back a bit into acquisition. Let me finish off acquisition a little bit just from your perspective. So where do you spend most of your time today, and what's kind of like the key lessons that are kind of like, you've got pre-product market fit, you've got post-product market fit. In terms of in the room, if we've got a lot of pre-product market fit, you're in an unusual situation, to say the least. But from the companies before, when you're earlier in your journey, what are the things you think people should be focusing on nowadays?
Yeah, so I did start my career. I worked for a web design company for 6 months, and then after that we created our own SaaS, pocketsmiths.com, which is still there today. If you're looking for personal finance software, it's probably the best out there. It's been a long time. And I did 3.5 years of marketing on no money.
You're still a shareholder.
Yeah. No, I am not.
Disclosure.
That was a good plug, but I'm not. I've learned to market on no money, right? And that's what still today, even with like 25 million, it's still, the ability to sing that
anything
way.
Really.
Yeah. But it's like different budget allow you to do different things, but it's not always the answer. And I think the earlier you are in the journey and the more you need to try things that don't scale, like try outbound, send some email, like go to events, try to see someone, do a little bit of paid, try a bit of SEO. What about your website? Like there's many acquisition channels that you can use right away.
Yeah, so things that don't scale, is that because exactly like that experience where you met the lady in the dress shop, because you do get a better sense of human requirements at that early stage, you need to have that contact?
Yeah, I think in growth, the better you get, the more you know you don't know, right? And so you can't like, after 15 years, I have a lot of playbooks up my sleeve, but I also know that if I were to talk to you about your business, I'd have to listen very carefully because you know better than I do. And so it's like the subtlety of like, who is your audience? How do they buy your software? What are they after? What are the sales motion? What are the marketing motion? And then you can figuring out like the rules for that.
I've got this. I'm doing another GPT-based session in May, but one of the things we're going to look at is whether SEO is dead. I just wanted to ask you, as sort of like digressing a bit, but in terms of an acquisition channel, content marketing, you think it's still alive even if the bots are going to create?
I mean, it's a revolution, 100%. Like the whole AI is a massive revolution, and we don't know what we don't know, but like, will people ever search for software solution to help their business? 100%. How are they going to do that? There's various ways of it, But for, I think, the near future, it would be very wise to be number one on Google for your main keyword. For sure.
All right.
Good,
good counsel. Yeah, so you work very much still on basically good keyword stuff as well as paid.
Yeah, so the story at Canva is quite interesting. So I actually started in product at Canva for the first 7 months, and I led like the first experience. So at Canva before, Canva.com was just a sign-up wall. Either you sign up or you don't. And what I led is like we have an anonymous editor now that allow you to use the product without having to sign up. And obviously that changed the game in terms of the funnel and the metrics. And then I moved to enterprise marketing, and we had an enterprise product. Now we don't, So it's been certainly like quite a journey in terms of like how we'll go through that.
Have you got a big fail that you can kind of just share that you've invested quite a bit of time into? It doesn't have to be from this company, but just somewhere where you really felt it was going to work and it just didn't work out for some reason, or the numbers were low, or it was a disaster.
Yeah, it always happened, I remember at Van, I was like, all right, our inbound flow is massive. In fact, we have so many leads that we have to use tools to find the right ones and all of that, right? So it's like, cool, let's do outbound. Outbound is so easy, And then I was like, okay, I found this tool and I started building the list and adding some intent data and do all of the cool stuff and thought I was really smart. And then craft the best message, think about it. Okay, as a sales rep, what do I need to say, Put my sequence, automate it, press the button, thinking that the next day I'll have like leads in my inbox for the salespeople. And there was none, and there was absolutely none. There was just absolutely no interest to the email that I was sending. The year?
Yeah, because everybody's really desensitized to cold emails.
2016, so 15, yeah.
Should have been getting 30% open rates.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think the 100%. Way I went about it is just not I just hacked it. I was just like, I know how to send an email automatically to the right people. Let's just do that.
Have you got any fails that you've seen in your time?
At Deputy, for sure. Like there was one that what we did was during onboarding, so we kind of like, as soon as you onboard, you land on the schedule week view, and kind of like we move you to last week, where what we wanted to eventually do is kind of like show you a timesheet with you on it, and kind of like show you to kind of like make sure that you go on, tap on it and approve it. I had to learn how to approve it, but that was such a massive failure in terms of like people kind of like went into it and they didn't know. They were like, oh, I just signed up. How do I have a timesheet for myself, like as a manager? Yeah. And they were like so confused. And she kind of like interviewed one of the people, and then we got to know, okay, this is the actual problem. And then we went through some full story videos and got to know, okay, this is how it's going. And then we changed the whole process now. And with gamification as well, it's like much more cleaner to know, okay, how we do it. Well, that was one of the fails. In my startup.
How long did that? Yeah, the time that it took to learn that lesson.
It did take time, and I think it did take some time. I think it took like more than 6 months for sure to figure out like what's going on.
So in terms of iterating on lessons from a growth team perspective, how important is really making a decision the next day after you got no leads, or did you let it drag on for 3 months? What do you think? Basically, short, sharp iterations, or 6 months sounds like a long time to learn a lesson.
I think that's I think it's because it's long time because we didn't have the tools at that time to know, okay, this is what's happening, and then later on once we had full story and this interview, that's how we got to know. Yeah, maybe it might be less than that, but yeah, for sure it's like a long time. But what we do right now, I think thanks to our data team and the way that we have set up like growth stack that we have, it's like much quicker like to learn, like we ship quickly and we learn quickly like within a month. If you're shipping an experiment, we get to know about it like 3 months or so, like how's the performance.
So statistical significance around an experiment is like a lot easier when you've got a user base, like the size of data that you can get from a Canva. But going back to that original thing, when did you decide to cut the cold emails?
I tried for like a couple of weeks, and then there was nothing, and I just cut it. I think it's like it's really about like the risk profile of the experiment. Like if you're changing your pricing, that's pretty risky. But if you know, like speaking of like startups and early stage journey, like that's where you take big gamble, because that's okay. Like even if you screw up, you can correct pretty quickly, which is really the key. And then it's about understanding how long does it take you from the data to really confidently say that it's a success or if it's a failure. And early on in your journey, it's harder. Like how do you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's 80% data, 20% intuition.
Yeah. And would you use a tool making that decision around risk? Would you use something like RICE? So. Not the elevation one for injuries, but in terms of scoring, whether you should go ahead with an experiment. Is it about reach? Impact.
Yeah, I mean, look, I got hired at Canva to lead an experiment that took 7 months to go to market. Which is lead that new way where you lead people into an anonymous editor of Canva, and so massive risk factor because you lose 25% of your sign up overnight. Right, and so the number of experiments we had to run along the way to validate assumption before you can, ship it globally, it's enormous.
Right. So you were doing that by cohorts or?
Countries.
Yep.
Yeah, countries observe like different behavior. How does that work? And then
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And what's so that I mentioned RICE. Is there a scoring that you guys think is a really great way to assess risk, or do you just kind of like, risk and impact?
Yeah, we use RISE for a roadmap, but we don't, like the risk is kind of like we know it,
Yeah.
Yeah, like, at the moment we do a lot of experiment on the pricing page at Canva, 0 experiment, it's obviously, higher risk, right?
Yep. Okay. Do you know how you...
I think so. We do use RISE, but I think we also do know that from the initiative itself and the OKRs that we have expect from them, like the feature or the experiment that we're gonna do, we do get a sense of risk, like you said. And the way that we roll out is kind of like the phased rollout for the mobile apps. And then the experiment itself is kind of like we initially start by 50-50 split and see how it goes, and then based on the performance we check out.
Cool. Okay. Very good. So I'll just move on because I'm conscious of time, but just in terms of retention, growth experiments around retention, we've talked a little bit up front about inviting other members of teams in a B2B type situation. What are the kind of like the key things that you guys have done that have worked in terms of retention? It's a bit funny because people are going to try and take the shift anyway. But anyway.
So do you mean the type of experiments that we have done?
Yeah. Is there something you can kind of speak to that's
right?
How much does retention play in comparison to onboarding in terms of prioritization?
Right. So one of the things that I could speak of is we recently did a web experiment, which was like in Deputy you could set up location and departments and areas. So for what we started with was an experiment, kind of like it takes you through a whole wizard to personalize your business down to like once you're onboarded, you could personalize your business, set up locations and multiple departments under it, like for each shift workers. And then what we figured out was like the success metric was like, okay, we would increase trial retention, but the craziest thing happened was the conversion rates were like 9% more than previous, and like the trial retention rate was like increased by 100 to 300%. And we were just like focusing on like initially we focused on like 43% of like trial retention, but it was almost like 83 something ish, and then 43 of them was like for trial, and then yeah, we got a really good result out of it.
Far out, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of retention, it does start with acquisition, because if you acquire the right people, they're more likely to stay, right? So you got to think about, it's just one old giant buying journey, and the more quality you get and the better you're gonna retain. So that's for sure. And then it's about, coming back to what I said, which is kind of like product marketing in a way, which is like the reality of like who is buying your product and how they're using. And then it's on you to be like, okay, how do I get to a stage where they are using it to solve that problem? Because if they do, they will retain. So in the case of Deputy, for example, is if you can get a site, start actually using it, even as a pilot, to roster their employees, then you are more likely to retain them because they got to that stage where they've experienced the value. And at Canva it's different. So Canva for work, for example, like for us, in terms of retention on team, it will have to be around like, do they actively use our docs, our presentations, our like, anything that they need to design and sort of like fit their needs in the work.
Yeah, so they're kind of like, there's these tentacles of associations that the user has as to reasons to come back to that. It's much more sticky the more touch points you have.
Yeah, and the data will tell you that, it's like, okay, like show me the data trends on the profile of people that retain, so I understand what they do, what are the milestones that they hit in your product that means that they're more likely to retain.
Yeah. Yeah, Raminder's example of that sort of like how was the shift afterwards is a really great example of, something that actually increases the stickiness, and so that's a really great example.
Yeah, I think that one of a couple of things that we do as well, like so we focus on the key actions that the manager does in the app, like kind of like, do you add people, do you add shifts, do you publish shifts from the app? And so that kind of like leads up to, okay, yeah, they are using the app, and then effectively they eventually kind of like convert from the trial retention, eventually that the user converts to the main app and they buy a plan. Yeah, so just focus on the key actions. Yeah.
All right, so given the time, I think what we might do is go to questions.